The day I told my husband I'd lost my job, I expected comfort, not cold, calculated anger. He thought I was broken, dependent, easy to discard. What he didn't know was that I hadn't been fired. I'd been promoted. That one lie pulled back the curtain on a plan to erase me from my own life, replace me with another woman, and destroy everything I'd built. I had to choose, reveal the truth and risk him hiding his tracks, or stay silent and watch his betrayal unfold. If you were me, would you speak up or let the trap close? What would you have done in my place? Told the truth and confronted him? Or stayed silent to uncover the full betrayal? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's talk about the choices that can change everything. Your perspective might just open someone else's eyes. The moment I told my husband I'd lost my job, he didn't even blink. No concern, no shock, just rage. Ethan slammed his laptop shut so hard the coffee mug next to it rattled. "Of course you got fired," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut skin. "You've always acted like you know better than everyone else. Maybe now you'll learn." I just stood there, still in my work clothes, clutching the straps of my purse like they were the only thing keeping me upright. I had rehearsed this moment in my head on the drive home, him pulling me into his arms, telling me we'd figure it out together. But this wasn't that moment. This wasn't that man. And here's the thing. I hadn't been fired. I'd been promoted unexpectedly, joyfully. After years of staying late without overtime pay, of quietly fixing mistakes that other people got credit for, I'd finally been recognized. A raise, a new title, more responsibility. It should have been one of the best days of my life. But as I walked up the hill toward our house that evening, I hesitated. For months, Ethan had been different, distant, distracted, and I knew exactly how he'd been raised, in a home where his mother, Margaret, drilled into him that the man is the provider. I could still hear her voice echoing through our kitchen from years of Sunday dinners, telling me in her passive-aggressive way how a wife's role is to support, not compete. So instead of sharing my good news, I decided to test him, to see how he'd react if the balance of power shifted, even just in theory. Turns out, I didn't have to wait long for my answer. He stared at me like I was a liability, a piece of dead weight he'd just realized he'd been dragging around for years. "Do you even understand the position you've put me in?" he barked. "How do you think we're going to pay the bills now?" Not once did he ask how I felt. Not once did he stop pacing long enough to look me in the eye. I said nothing, not because I didn't want to defend myself, but because I physically couldn't. My throat locked up, my chest tight, like my body knew instinctively that silence was the safest option, and maybe that was a good thing, because if I had told him the truth, that my salary was about to outpace his, I would have missed what came next. I wouldn't have seen the cracks that were starting to form beneath his carefully crafted surface. Instead, I just watched him rant about how my job was never real work anyway, how I just shuffled papers while he built things that mattered. Later, I barely remember walking into the bathroom. I turned on the shower, stripped down, and stood there under scalding water until my skin burned. I kept thinking maybe I could wash away the humiliation, the confusion, the tiny seed of fear blooming in my gut. That night, he slept on the couch without a word. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. And here's the part that still twists my stomach. I'd seen the signs. For months, the late nights at the office, the way his phone, once casually left on the counter, was now glued to his side, face down, locked. The way he'd shrug off our Saturday brunches, a tradition we'd kept since we were dating, with nothing more than maybe next week. I told myself it was stress. His architecture firm had taken on a massive waterfront development project, and he was working more than usual. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. Because the alternative, that the man I'd shared a bed with for 10 years was slipping away from me, was too painful to face. But the moment that burned itself into my memory happened 2 months before the fake firing. I'd gotten off work early one Friday. My team had wrapped a campaign ahead of schedule, and I thought it would be nice to surprise Ethan, make his favorite dinner, open a bottle of wine, bring back a little piece of us. When I opened the front door, I heard his voice from down the hall. It wasn't his normal voice. It was low, clipped, like every word had been rehearsed. "No, she doesn't suspect anything yet," he said. I froze, my hand still on the doorknob. There was a pause. Then, "We just need a little more time." And then he laughed, but not the warm, easy laugh I fell in love with. This was something else entirely. Cold, detached, almost cruel. I stood there, rooted to the hardwood floor, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. I didn't know who was on the other end of that call, didn't know what a little more time meant, but I knew deep in my bones that he was talking about me. When he walked out and saw me, he smiled, kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day like nothing had happened. I smiled back, started boiling pasta, pretended everything was fine. But inside, something cracked. It was invisible from the outside, but I could feel it spreading, and that fracture would change everything. After that Friday night, I started watching Ethan differently. It wasn't conscious at first, just quieter, more careful. I noticed the way his eyes flickered away when I asked about his day, the way he used vague words like busy and fine instead of details, how his phone was never more than an arm's reach away, even in the bathroom. And then there was the smell. Once or twice, he came home with a faint trace of perfume I didn't wear. The first time, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a client or someone at the office hugged him hello. The second time, my stomach tightened. By the third, I stopped making excuses. I didn't want to become the paranoid wife, the one snooping through drawers, scrolling through phone logs at 2 a.m. But my gut was screaming. And I've learned that your gut is rarely wrong. It just whispers at first, and if you ignore it long enough, it starts to shout. Still, I played my part, smiling when he came home late, asking if he wanted dinner reheated, letting him think I was still the woman who trusted him completely. But inside, I was filing everything away. His late night, every text he wouldn't open in front of me, every Saturday morning he suddenly needed to run errands alone. I told myself I'd wait until I was sure, collect more signs, be smart, don't jump without proof. That proof came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I'd taken the day off from work. I told Ethan I wasn't feeling well, and he didn't question it. In his mind, I was still unemployed, fragile, licking my wounds from being fought. What he didn't know was that I'd spent the morning reorganizing my home office, a space he never touched, and answering emails from my actual job. Around 2 p.m., I heard the front door open. Footsteps. Not just one set, two. I froze. The second voice was unmistakable. Margaret, my mother-in-law. I stepped silently into the hallway, leaving the guest room door cracked just enough to see a slice of the living room. Margaret's voice was sharp but oddly cheerful. Well, this is unexpected. Why the midday visit? Ethan chuckled. Everything's going exactly as planned. The air seemed to drain out of the room. She told me yesterday she got fired. Totally devastated. Just like you predicted. I slapped a hand over my mouth to stop the gasp threatening to escape. Margaret let out a satisfied sigh. Finally, she won't have any choice now. She'll have to agree to our terms. Terms. My knees felt weak, and I leaned against the wall to keep from collapsing. She's completely dependent on me now, Ethan went on. Selling the house is just a matter of time. Margaret chuckled. A smug, cruel little sound. See? I told you she was never right for you. Too ambitious, too independent. You really think she'd still be with you if it weren't for your father's house? That house, our home, for a decade. My money, my time, my heart had been poured into every inch of it, and now they were talking about selling it like it was just another asset to cash in? Don't start, Mom, Ethan said, almost bored. We already talked about this. And what about Sophie? Margaret asked. The name hit me like ice water. Sophie Lane, Daniel's old girlfriend. Daniel, Ethan's older brother, had died 3 years ago in a car accident. Sophie had disappeared after the funeral. I never imagined she'd resurface. She's ready, Ethan said, and his voice softened in a way it never did for me anymore. The baby's doing great. She says he's growing fast. Already looks just like Daniel. My stomach lurched violently. I'll adopt him as soon as the divorce goes through, Ethan continued, like he was discussing a business deal. He'll be my son. Our son. Margaret's voice turned syrupy. Just think how happy Sophie will be when she hears the house is going up for sale. She's waited so long for this. The walls felt like they were closing in. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a coordinated replacement. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to erase me. Rewrite the story so I'd never existed. And I had no idea how long it had been in motion. Margaret broke the moment. What if she fights you on the divorce? Ethan's tone went low, controlled. She won't. Not if I handle it right. I'll remind her she's got nowhere to go. No job, no savings. She'll fold. Every nerve in my body screamed. And if she doesn't, Margaret pressed. Then we hit her with the infidelity angle. I almost stumbled backward. What infidelity? Margaret asked. Doesn't matter, Ethan replied. I've got old photos from that conference she went to 2 years ago. Just her with some male colleagues, but they can be interpreted the right way. Margaret laughed like it was clever. You're just like your father. But Ethan wasn't finished. If that doesn't work, we accuse her of leaking company data. She's brought home files before. I'll say I caught her trying to sell them, enough to ruin her career. I sank slowly to the floor, my hands like ice. This man, the one who'd once painted our bedroom walls my favorite shade of blue, who'd held me through my grandmother's funeral, was plotting to destroy me from the inside out. And for what? For Sophie. For a child that wasn't even his. For a perfect little family, with his mother's approval stamped all over it. I stayed crouched behind that door long after they stopped talking. Even after I heard the front door close behind Margaret, I didn't move. Because something had shifted in me. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This wasn't grief. This was war. And I had been walking into it unarmed. Not anymore. I don't remember standing up. One moment I was crouched behind the guest room door, my knees aching from holding still too long. The next, I was moving quietly, deliberately, like my body had switched into autopilot. I didn't slam doors. I didn't cry. I didn't storm into the living room demanding answers, not because I didn't want to, but because for the first time in this entire nightmare, I realized I had something Ethan didn't: information. He thought I was broke, defenseless, cornered. He thought his plan was flawless, but he didn't know that I still had my job, that I'd just been promoted, that my firing was a fabrication designed to test him, and he had failed spectacular. That night, he acted like nothing had happened. He poured himself a drink, watched some basketball game, and occasionally tossed me a glance that felt like a measuring tape, checking if I was still small enough to fit into the box he'd built for me. I didn't give him anything, just quiet, neutral, almost bored. I went to bed early, my back to him. He fell asleep on the couch, snoring softly, completely unaware that the version of me he thought he was dismantling had already died in that hallway. The next morning, I left before sunrise. Not for work, not yet. I drove to the storage closet in our basement where we kept years' worth of paperwork, receipts, contracts, bank statements. I pulled out everything with my name on it. The water heater, my bonus had paid for that. The custom cabinetry in the kitchen, my design, my deposit. The bathroom remodel, I'd written the check myself. Every improvement, every investment I'd made into our home, I gathered the proof. If Ethan wanted to pretend it was all his, he'd have to crawl over a mountain of receipts to do it. When I'd stuffed the last binder into a canvas tote, I drove across town to the only person I trusted, Emma Brooks. Emma wasn't just a colleague. She was my anchor during endless late nights at the office. She knew my coffee order, my favorite wine, the name of the stray cat I once tried to adopt, and most importantly, she'd never once betrayed me. Not even with harmless gossip. When she opened her apartment door, she took one look at my face and stepped aside without a word. "I need a favor," I said quietly. "Say no more." In her kitchen, I laid the tote on the table. "If anything happens to me, if I disappear, stop answering calls. Give this to my lawyer." Her eyebrows shot up, but she didn't ask. "Not yet. I'm not being paranoid," I added, seeing the concern in her eyes, "but I can't take risks." Emma reached out, squeezing my hand. "You've got me, whatever you need." That simple sentence loosened something in my chest. For days, I'd been holding it all in, the fear, the humiliation, the fury, like water pressing against a dam. Her words were the first crack of relief. I didn't tell her about Sophie, or the baby, or how my mother-in-law had been in on it from the start. Some truths were too jagged to say out loud yet, but she understood enough that something was very, very wrong. By the time I left Emma's, I had a plan forming. Step 1, protect my assets. Step 2, get the best divorce attorney in Seattle before Ethan even realized I was looking. Her name came to me instantly, Monica Bell. She had a reputation for being ruthless when her clients were wronged, and fair when they weren't. The kind of lawyer who didn't just play defense, she went for the jugular. 2 days later, I walked into her office, an old brick building squeezed between a florist and a tax accountant. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender and ink. I sat across from her and laid out the basics. I didn't mention Sophie or the baby. That was my ace. I only told her about the house, the years of shared expenses, the insulting settlement Ethan had hinted at. Monica listened without interrupting, her pen gliding over a yellow legal pad like she was sketching a blueprint for war. You've been married 12 years? She asked. 10 legally, 2 before that. Any children? No. Proof of contributions to the home? I slid the receipts and bank statements across the desk. Every penny? She scanned the papers, then looked up at me. Olivia, you have a strong case, but I need you to understand. If we move forward, this won't be pretty. He's going to fight dirty. I held her gaze. Here he is. Something in her eyes shifted. Not pity. Respect. Then, she said, let's get to work. When I walked out of her office, the air felt different, cooler, lighter. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't drowning. I had someone in my corner. I had proof. I had leverage. Ethan still thought I was the fragile wife who'd fold at the first sign of a fight. But now I was a threat. And I couldn't wait to see his face when he realized it. The night Ethan decided to have the talk, I knew it before he even opened his mouth. I could see it in the way he arranged the living room, like he was setting a stage. The lights dimmed just enough to look intimate, 2 glasses of wine on the coffee table, a blanket draped artfully over the armrest, the props of a man about to deliver a gentle heartbreak. Hey, he said, his voice low, careful, like we were about to discuss something tragic. We should talk. I gave him a small, tired smile. Sure. He gestured toward the couch, and I sat. He took the armchair opposite me, lacing his fingers together with a sigh so theatrical it almost made me laugh. I've been thinking a lot lately, he began, eyes locked on mine, about us, where we are. I think we've grown apart. I let my gaze drop to the wine glass, nodding slowly. He leaned forward, trying to look pained, noble even. I don't want this to get ugly, he continued. I don't want lawyers or courtrooms. I just think maybe it's time we both admit this marriage isn't working anymore. He paused for effect, then added in a voice dripping with false compassion. And with you being out of work now, maybe this is the right time for a fresh start for both of us. My stomach churned, but I kept my face soft, my lip trembling just enough to sell the part. Are you saying divorce? He nodded, as if the word was breaking his heart. Yeah, but amicable, civil. I'll help you get back on your feet. You'll need a place to stay, of course, and some money to get settled. I tilted my head slightly. You'd do that for me? Of course, he said, touching his chest like some benevolent savior. I care about you, Olivia. I just think we've both changed. Then came the hook he'd been waiting to drop in the house. It's legally mine. My father left it to me. But I want to be fair. I'll give you a settlement, something to help with rent for a few months. I asked how much. He named a number so insulting it nearly made me laugh out loud. But I didn't flinch. Instead, I stared at him like I was seeing him for the first time. I just thought we'd try harder, I whispered. I thought we were stronger than this. He reached across the table, touching my hand like a man already writing his victory speech in his head. I'm sorry, but this is the best path forward. I promise. And right there, I gave him what he wanted most, apparent surrender. I nodded slowly, eyes misty, lips pressed tight, like I was swallowing a sob. Okay, I'll think about it. He exhaled, visibly relieved, certain the game was over, but the real game hadn't even started. The next morning, I was gone before he woke up. No note, no explanation. I drove downtown to Monica's office with a renewed clarity. We went over everything, the timeline, the receipts, the bank records. She explained exactly how we'd dismantle his amicable charade in court, and I agreed to every move. By the time I left, I was no longer acting from fear. I was acting from strategy. Ethan thought he had me exactly where he wanted me. Small, broken, grateful for scrap. But every time he smiled that smug little smile in the days that followed, every time he thought he was reeling me closer to signing his insulting settlement, I smiled back because I knew the truth. He wasn't pulling me in. I was pulling him right into the trap. When Ethan finally brought it up again, it was a Tuesday night. We were sitting in the same seats as before, him in the armchair, me on the couch. The wine glasses were back, the blanket over the armrest, the whole setup recycled, like he thought the first performance had been a hit. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady but his jaw tight. "We should finalize things. The divorce, the paperwork, get it all settled so we can both move on." I nodded lightly. "Okay." He blinked, thrown off. "So, you agree?" "I'm not fighting the divorce," I said gently, "but I do want to make sure it's fair. So, I've spoken with someone." The shift in his face was instant, his lips tightening, eyes narrowing. "Someone? A lawyer?" "Yes." He laughed, but it was sharp and defensive. "Olivia, come on. I'm offering a generous settlement. We can handle this ourselves." "You said the house was legally yours," I replied calmly, "but we've both lived here for over a decade. I've invested in it. I have receipts. I just want that acknowledged." His voice rose. "You lived here. That's not the same as owning it." "I paid for the kitchen remodel," I said, my voice still soft. "The bathroom tiles, the appliances, all from my accounts." He stood up, pacing now. "I don't want this to get ugly." "Then don't insult me with a number that barely covers 3 months' rent," I said, finally meeting his eye. For the first time, the mask slipped. I saw the flash of panic beneath his anger. "You're being unreasonable," he snapped. "No," I said. "I'm being smart. You taught me that, remember? Plan ahead, protect your assets." He stopped pacing, staring at me like he was recalculating the entire game. But I didn't give him the chance to catch up. "I'm not here to destroy you, Ethan," I said evenly. "I just won't let you erase me." The divorce took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of him dragging his feet, throwing petty obstacles into the process. 6 weeks of his lawyer, a smug old friend he'd probably bragged about to Margaret, trying to twist facts and lowball offers. But Monica was sharper, smarter, ruthless when she needed to be. She had every document, every receipt, every piece of proof that tied me to that house. In the end, I walked away with a settlement that acknowledged my financial stake and years of contribution. Not more than I deserved, but not a cent less. The last time I saw Ethan was in a sterile downtown conference room, signing the final papers. Sophie wasn't there, but I could feel her shadow in the empty chair next to him. When it was over, I stood, slid the pen into my bag, and looked him in the eye. "You always underestimated me," I said. He didn't respond. "You didn't have to." I could see it in his face. Not regret, not even anger, just the stunned realization that the ending he had written for me had been completely rewritten. I moved into a small apartment overlooking the water. Not fancy, not big, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, I kept every light on. Not out of fear, but because I could. I heard through Emma that things with Sophie weren't going as smoothly as they'd imagined. Money was tighter than expected, and Margaret's constant advice was wearing thin. I didn't gloat. I didn't even care. Because the truth is, I wasn't watching them anymore. I wasn't measuring my life against theirs. I was rebuilding on my own terms. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: being underestimated is the most dangerous gift life can give you. Because when you rise, when you fight back, no one sees it coming.